king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 235. Come quietly and leave quietly. After the father-in-law and son-in-law reconciled, their relationship immediately became so good that they were arm in arm with each other and were all smiling. Marin naturally lifted his father-in-law's house arrest and took his father-in-law to the palace in Auric to visit Angela. Arriving outside the master bedroom of the palace, Marin knocked on the door and said loudly, "Angela, look who I brought to see you." "Dear, who is it?" "A very special guest." "Very special. Guaranteed to surprise you." Then, Angela opened the door directly and saw Archbishop Rovere standing next to Marin. "Dad," Angela immediately rushed forward excitedly, threw herself into the arms of Archbishop Rovere, and almost threw Archbishop Rovere, who was in his 50s, to the ground. Fortunately, Marin helped him and prevented his father-in-law from falling. Then, the excited Angela welcomed Archbishop Rovere into the room and started the father and daughter reminiscing mode. Although Marin stood aside, he was ignored by the father and daughter. "Angela, you've grown taller and your face has more flesh. You're even cuter," Archbishop Rovere said with a smile as he looked at his favorite daughter. "It's all Marin's fault. He makes so many delicious dishes for me every day, which makes me gain weight." Angela pouted and said depressedly, "As a well-educated noble lady, how can I gain weight?" Therefore, Angela usually pays attention to controlling her diet. However, the Chinese food that Marin made in various ways was so delicious that Angela couldn't stop eating, so she often ate too much. And Marin spoiled her too much and didn't stop her from eating more. In fact, Angela is just a little girl with baby fat now, not fat. But girls are like this, they will make a fuss if they are just a little fat. "Huh, my dear daughter, the food here is really good. I've been eating very well these days." Archbishop Rovere suddenly stopped talking. He remembered that he was under house arrest a few days ago, and his face looked a little unhappy. Moreover, he also let something slip. "These few days? Dad, you've been here for a few days, but you didn't come to see me?" Angela was unhappy. "Ahem, slip of the tongue. I just arrived today, but the lunch just now was indeed delicious. Yes, everything is good here. Brother Marin is very good to me. He brings me all the delicious food, clothes and fun things. But I miss my parents and sister a little," Angela said, her eyes red. "Dad is busy with something." "I'm so sorry, Angela. As for your mother and sister, Marin, can you find a way to bring them here?" "But, Felice." What Marin wanted to say was that it was okay to bring his mother-in-law here. But Felice was married, so would her husband agree to bring her to East Frisia? Archbishop Rovere also saw Marin's doubts. So he pulled Marin aside and whispered, "Send someone to investigate. If Felice is not married, that's the best. If she is married and she is a noble, forget it. If she is not a noble, just bring her here." What about her husband? Who would want their wife to be taken away? If her husband doesn't know the identities of Felice and her daughter, then he can just take them away. If he knows their true identities, then let him disappear. "Ah, that's your son-in-law." Marin stammered, feeling a little creepy in his heart. "Damn, you're so quick to attack your son-in-law. I'm also your son-in-law, so I have to be on guard against you. How can my daughter marry a commoner? Even the most hopeless person would be like you. I am the man who will become the Pope." Archbishop Rovere looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, acting like a lonely master. "The most useless, like me?" Marin was choked and speechless. "Damn it, I am the Earl of a great country, but in your eyes I am still the most useless. When you become the Pope, you will say this. Now I am still a wanted criminal of the Holy See, and I dare to look down on me like this." Marin really wants to pick up the broom at his feet and throw it at his father-in-law's face. Of course, didn't you see Alexander VI's sons and daughters? His sons are all dukes, and his daughters are married to duke's sons. You are just a small count, aren't you just useless? Marin's eyes were filled with tears, and he was speechless. But Marin quickly realized that his son was a duke, and his daughter married the duke's son, which was arranged by him after he became the Pope. "You haven't become the Pope yet, so you have the right to look down on me?" After agreeing to bring Archbishop Rovere's mistress and youngest daughter Felice to East Frisia, Marin suddenly remembered another thing. He stopped Archbishop Rovere, who wanted to go back and continue to reminisce with his daughter. "Father-in-law, I've married Angela. Will the French count's son that you found continue to pester me?" "I'm not afraid of him pestering me, but I'm afraid that he will tell Alexander VI about your daughter marrying me. If he knew that I married the daughter of his mortal enemy, wouldn't he excommunicate me? By then, I'll have nowhere to hide." Don't worry about that. I only showed Angela's portrait to Master Walani before. Besides, he didn't know Angela was my daughter. As an archbishop, Rovere naturally couldn't tell others that he had a daughter. So, when he tried to please the Walani family, he introduced Angela as the daughter of a good friend. Moreover, when he came to East Frisia to look for Angela, Archbishop Rovere only said that he came here to confirm whether Angela was here, but he didn't say for sure that Angela was here. That's good. When you get back, just tell me. I've been around for so many years, and I still need you to teach me how to lie. Archbishop Rovere looked at Marin with contempt. Marin thought about it and it was right. Archbishop Rovere had been in the Vatican for so many years, and his ability to lie and trick people was much better than his own. He really didn't need to say anything. He was also used to commanding his not-so-smart subordinates, and he had forgotten that Archbishop Rovere was a very smart politician. Archbishop Rovere quietly stayed in the Auric Palace for a few days, and after spending enough time with his daughter, he led his men and quietly set out on the road back to Paris. Before leaving, Marin generously gave his father-in-law 50,000 gold coins as pocket money. In fact, Marin was just investing. If Archbishop Rovere became pope, the reward for him would be immeasurable. Archbishop Rovere also gave up the plan of relying on France to overthrow Alexander VI. Now, he began to plan to secretly eliminate Alexander VI according to what Marin said. However, to arrange for someone to infiltrate the Vatican and get close to Alexander VI, he needed to get through many connections. Therefore, the cost was not small. The 50,000 gold coins that Marin gave him just solved the urgent problem. I left quietly, just as I came quietly. I waved my sleeves and took away 50,000 gold coins. Looking at his father-in-law's horse team going away on the road, Marin unconsciously thought of Lao Tzu's poem, but changed the ending. Chapter 236 The Emperor's Actions in the Tyrol region of Austria. Maximilian I had just finished the spring plowing in Austria. For the sake of spring plowing, he even suspended his plan to seize the Graubünden region of Switzerland. The reason is simple, because spring plowing is too important to the feudal lords. In this era, there is not much industry, and the nobles' income mainly comes from agricultural and commercial taxes. For the Austrian region, which is underdeveloped and located in the inland, agriculture is of vital importance. Therefore, even a major event like the seizure of Graubünden has to temporarily give way to spring plowing. Because the march to Graubünden was not only a matter for the army, but also had a lot to do with the farmers. Generally speaking, if the army had more than 5,000 people, it would need a lot of civilians to transport food and supplies in order to continue fighting. But Marin's last attempt to seize East Frisia was an accident, because Marin already had the means to break the city, which made the war very short. Therefore, there was no need for civilian transport. But if a long-lasting siege war was fought, a team of thousands or tens of thousands would require a lot of civilians. In fact, the number of civilians needed was not less than the number of soldiers. Although Marin's strategy could ensure that Maximilian I could quickly capture several important cities in the Graubünden region, the emperor could also imagine that he would encounter fierce resistance at that time. After all, the people in the Swiss region were tough. Although the emperor would definitely win after taking several important cities and passes, he would also need a large amount of supplies in the middle of the journey to deal with the counterattack of local forces. Therefore, the emperor not only had to bring tens of thousands of troops this time, but also tens of thousands of civilians and livestock to carry supplies. However, during the spring plowing season, all civilians and livestock had to go to the fields to plow. Therefore, if the emperor wanted to take action, he had to wait patiently until the spring plowing season was over. Unless, he wanted Austria to suffer a famine after the autumn harvest. After the spring plowing was over at the end of April, the emperor could not wait to gather soldiers and civilians to prepare for the march into Rome. After returning to Austria in January, Maximilian I began to make preparations. First, the emperor sent a secret envoy with 20,000 gold coins to Rome to bribe Caesar, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, and revealed to the other party that he was going to pretend to march on Rome, this time, asking them not to worry or take hostile actions. Although he thought the emperor was stingy and gave little money, Caesar Borgia still accepted the emperor's bribe on behalf of Alexander VI. After all, 20,000 gold coins were not a small amount. For the poor Emperor Maximilian I, it was a big loss. Anyway, the Pope didn't lose much this time, so he just watched the show. When the emperor stopped marching into Rome as promised, he would issue a bland statement. As long as the other party didn't really lead troops into Italy, there was no need for the Vatican to be the enemy of the emperor. In addition, the emperor also sent people to carry out extensive propaganda in Austria, Switzerland, and even northern Italy. It is tragic to say that although Maximilian I should have been the emperor, he had not yet been officially crowned in Rome. Therefore, his official title should be King of the Roman People or King of Germany, not Holy Roman Emperor. Generally speaking, many foreigners believe that Maximilian I is just the King of Germany and does not even recognize the King of the Roman People. However, in the German region, people generally recognize that the emperor is the King of the Roman People. In fact, except for the opposition, most Germans also recognize that Maximilian I is the Holy Roman Emperor, but he just lacks a coronation ceremony. In any case, Maximilian I had to go to Rome to be officially crowned. Therefore, most people understood that Maximilian I was impatient and wanted to march to Rome. After all, Maximilian I had been king for 12 years, becoming the King of Germany in 1486, and quasi-emperor for 5 years. His father Frederick III died in 1493. Now, it was reasonable for him to be impatient and want to go to Rome for the coronation. Therefore, the Graubünden region had no objection to the emperor using the passage to Rome. After all, in European history, there had never been such a despicable thing as using the passage to attack Gua. Therefore, not many people would be wary of this. Besides, if Maximilian I really took the opportunity to seize Graubünden while passing through, he would be too embarrassed to come out in the future. But the people of Graubünden didn't know that behind the emperor was a sinister guy named Marin, who gave the emperor a bad idea of fake assassination. As long as the emperor was assassinated when passing through Graubünden, it would be reasonable for the emperor to seize Graubünden in anger. After all, no matter who it is, as long as they are normal people, if they are almost killed, they will have the idea of retaliating. Because the emperor publicly announced that he would go to Rome to be crowned, the German region was divided into two completely different opinions. One group was the emperor's supporters, who believed that it was natural and legal for the emperor to go to Rome for the coronation. It would be best if the emperor brought more troops to show the power of the Germans. The other faction was the princes who opposed the emperor. They would not openly oppose the emperor, but they generally had a bad impression of him and privately hoped that he would fail in his coronation. Because if the emperor succeeded in his coronation, his reputation would rise to a higher level, which would suppress the princes. Because the imperial power and the autonomy of the princes were naturally opposed, and it was a relationship of one rising while the other fell. However, except for the emperor and Marin, and a few people who knew the emperor's plan, no one ever doubted whether the emperor was really going to Rome. This is also the power of Marin's plan. After all, the emperor does have the motivation and necessity to go to Rome for the crowning, so outsiders will not have any suspicion. Therefore, the various forces in Graubünden, who were the targets of the conspiracy, were planning to hide their property to prevent the emperor's army from stealing it when passing by. The military discipline of the army at that time was very poor. There was not much difference between a large army passing through and a swarm of locusts passing through. Therefore, the Swiss in Graubünden tried their best to avoid their property being discovered by the passing emperor's army. As for the rest, they did not think much about it. When the emperor gathered his army, the people of Graubünden were not nervous at all. They were just worried that the army would rob people as they passed through their border. In their opinion, when the emperor's army passed through Graubünden, everyone put away their belongings and locked the door, and that was enough. In fact, Maximilian I was always a very chivalrous king, and was called the last knight by later generations. Normally, he was also a very chivalrous person. Therefore, his reputation was still very good. No one thought that he would use such an unethical method as using the pretext of attacking Gua to expand his territory. In fact, this was also because Maximilian I was deeply influenced by Marin. Marin relied on such dishonorable means as ambush to severely damage the knights led by Charles VIII and reaped a great harvest. Even if Marin only handed over half of the spoils, Maximilian I, who was used to being poor, gained a lot of wealth, which made him crazy. It was precisely because Maximilian I saw that the means taken by Marin, although seemingly not very bright, were extremely profitable, that he became interested in Marin's way of plotting against people and was willing to give it a try. Most importantly, the conspiracy designed by Marin will not damage his reputation. Because the planned, fake assassination will put all the blame on the Graubünden people. And the emperor is still the very graceful monarch, and everything is the fault of the Graubünden people. After seeing the good prospect of easily gaining a large territory in important passes without damaging his reputation, Maximilian I decisively put down his psychological burden, frankly adopted Marin's strategy, and prepared for it for several months. Chapter 237 Ada's revolver. When the emperor was almost ready, he sent someone to Auric to inform Marin to get ready and take 2 Mongolian doctors to Switzerland to rescue the emperor. So Marin began to make preparations. While Marin was selecting his men and horses and preparing to set off, Da Vinci, who was originally immersed in studying the revolver musket in Denberg, suddenly came to Auric. "Oh, it's Ada. Long time no see, how are you doing recently? By the way, are you still with that fat girl?" Da Vinci rolled his eyes. Marin was really talking about something that was not relevant. As for the fat girl, she had been sent away by Da Vinci long ago. After all, she was just a prostitute. "My Lord Baron, I came back this time because I completed the task you assigned to me." "Mission? What mission?" Marin didn't react at first. But soon, he was filled with surprise. "You mean, you have successfully developed your revolver flintlock?" "Yeah, of course." Da Vinci looked proud. But soon, Marin's blow came. "Why is it so slow? It's been a year. You kid, do you think it's easy to develop a machine? It took several months just for testing. During this period, I also blew up many gun barrels. It took a long time to test just the selection of the gun barrel." Da Vinci said angrily, without using honorifics. "Is the gun barrel so difficult to develop? Wouldn't it be safer if it was made thicker?" Marin was a little confused. "You're the one who caused the trouble. You said this is a cavalry gun, so the lighter it is, the better. So I had to control the thickness of the barrel as much as possible. It's really troublesome. You asked for the barrel to be 50 centimeters long and the weight of the gun to be no more than 3 kilograms. If it weren't for your stringent requirements, the musket could be developed in a few months. I forgot to mention these conditions." Marin was a little embarrassed. At the beginning, these conditions were all proposed by Marin in order to form the Black Knights. Cavalry guns, of course, seek lightness. Because the Black Knights have to carry several of these guns. If each one is so heavy, the warhorse will not be able to bear it. In addition, Marin also asked Da Vinci to use more powerful granulated black gunpowder. Therefore, the barrel should be thinner to prevent it from exploding easily. Fortunately, Da Vinci was quite cautious. When testing the gun barrel, he sent prisoners from the prison to test it instead of doing it himself. However, this also led to 7 or 8 prisoners being maimed during the barrel testing phase. However, in the early days, Leonardo da Vinci and his craftsmen used gun barrels made of pig iron, which often exploded. Later, Marin remembered that he had a team that specialized in providing wrought iron ingots to Old John's Cannon Foundry. So Marin arranged for the team that processed pig iron ingots imported from the UK into wrought iron ingots to provide wrought iron to Leonardo da Vinci, which solved the problem of gun barrels exploding easily. As for the problem of making fine steel springs, it has always been a top priority. Although Marin sent Kohler to Venice to find a supplier of pyrolusite from Hungary, he has not actually made any purchases. Even if the pyrolusite is delivered, Marin cannot immediately produce 65 Mn spring steel. That thing cannot be made in a short time. Even if Marin knows the composition of this spring steel, he cannot make it in a short time. After all, he is not a steel engineer and does not know the process of making spring steel. It is said that the quenching of spring steel is also very particular. It is also divided into water quenching and oil quenching. Now quenching also requires the use of quenching chemicals to strengthen the metal. Marin certainly didn't have any quenching chemicals, nor did he understand the principle, so he could only choose between water quenching and oil quenching, or find a balance. This required the craftsman to try slowly, and God knows when it will be successful. Just controlling the manganese content of spring steel would take a long time. Therefore, at this stage, Marin can only choose Da Vinci's plan, let several spring-making masters invited and tied up from Italy to hand-make fine steel springs. All the springs are made of raw iron bars that have been repeatedly forged by masters, and the scrap rate is still very high. In the end, the finished sample gun that Da Vinci brought to Marin cost as much as 5 gold coins. 5 gold coins? Marin exclaimed in surprise. 1 gold coin was worth 60 pfennigs, and 5 gold coins were worth 300 pfennigs, equivalent to 150 days' wages for an ordinary person. It took us several months of research to finally control the cost. Leonardo da Vinci also felt depressed. The cost of manually making a small fine steel spring was too high. In fact, the cost of fine steel springs is so high because the people who make them are all master craftsmen. It is difficult for ordinary craftsmen to make qualified fine steel springs. This job requires a lot of skills. But how much is the labor cost of the masters? They spend a lot of time repeatedly forging the spring, how can the cost be low? Therefore, the cost of a revolver flintlock is as high as 5 gold coins, and the selling price is estimated to be 10 gold coins. Marin was a little dizzy. In his imagination, each of the black-shirt knights would carry 5 of these revolver muskets. At a cost of 5 gold coins each, wouldn't that mean each person would carry equipment worth 25 gold coins? This was still the cost price. Converted to the selling price, the muskets carried by each person would be worth 50 gold coins, very luxurious. As for the performance of the gun, thanks to the efforts of Ada and several master craftsmen, it is quite good. After all, the original version of the revolver flint gun is a steel head rubbing against a spring steel sheet. If the steel head is rusted, it may not be able to produce fire. But Marin asked Da Vinci to directly use the front part of the steel base to clamp the flint, and the spring steel sheet rubbed the flint. The supply of sparks is very stable, so the performance is naturally good. Moreover, Leonardo da Vinci also added a copper sheet shield to the powder pool outside the firing hole to effectively prevent rain. This powder pool is very similar to that of a flintlock, and is also pressed down by an iron sheet to prevent the powder from being lost during the bumps. But when the spring of the musket starts to turn, a gear will push the iron sheet away, exposing the gunpowder in the powder pool, waiting for the sparks generated by the steel sheet and flint to splash in, thereby igniting the powder pool and igniting the charge in the barrel through the firing hole. Because of the copper cover, as long as the gun is not exposed to moisture during loading, the gun can be fired freely even in the rain. After all, Leonardo da Vinci was a rigorous scientist. When the gun was delivered to Marin, it had already been tested for several months and there was almost no risk of dangerous situations such as barrel explosion. Moreover, because it uses granular gunpowder, even if it is a short gun, the effective range of this gun is 50 meters, instead of the 20 steps, 30 meters, used by the original black-shirt knights in history. After all, the original black-shirt knights in history used powdered gunpowder with much less power. Marin used granular processed gunpowder for the black-shirt knights, which had a very different power. Just like the early muskets, the effective range was less than 100 yards. But by the Napoleonic Wars, because gunpowder was fully granulated and finely processed, the effective range reached more than 200 meters. Of course, this effective range refers to the effective killing distance, not the distance that can be aimed. Because the bullets of a smoothbore rifle will fly all over the sky and the ground as long as they are more than 100 meters away. Those who are hit by a smoothbore rifle at a distance of 100 meters are unlucky and unlucky. They deserve this disaster. If powdered gunpowder is used instead, Marin tested it and found that the effective range is indeed 30 meters, 20 steps. Even so, it is enough. Because the main targets of the black-shirt knights were the heavily armored knights who were unable to move easily, or the spearmen who formed a square formation. After all, these two types of soldiers were slow runners and stood there as targets. Even if they wanted to chase, the black-shirt knights were lightly armed, compared to the plate-armored knights, so even if they chased, the plate-armored knights couldn't catch up. The spear infantry were even less likely to catch up. The black-shirt knights, however, could face the plate-armored knights and calmly shoot the 30-gram pellets from the 5 loaded revolver flintlocks at the bulky plate-armored knights. They could even run away while turning back to shoot. The Mongol cavalry archers may need very high archery skills to use the Tamangadai tactic. But the black-shirt knights do not need such high skills to use this tactic. Because, when shooting back at the plate knights, they only need to aim accurately, and do not need too much pulling force or anything. At most, they can withstand the recoil of the musket, but they can withstand it. Unlike the Mongol cavalry archers, they need hundreds of pounds of pulling force to pull the bowstring, which is very demanding. When the Black Knights first appeared, they used their dirty tactics to beat the French knights like dogs, and they continued to attack even when it rained. After the French suffered a great loss, the best countermeasure they could think of was to hire the German Black Knights to fight against them. Fiddling with the revolver in his hand, Marin could already foresee the scene of the black-shirt knights brutally beating the French plate-armored knights in the future. However, thinking of the French anger and possible revenge afterwards, Marin shuddered again, and his heart was full of contradictions.